Good morning and welcome to this webinar. It's great to see so many people have joined us this morning for this webinar on more cycling for a green recovery. My name is Morten Cavell. I'm one of today's three hosts that you'll meet. I'm the co-CEO of the European Cyclists Federation, and you happen to find me there in the middle of the screen. Benjamin Barber, the late American theorist and author, wrote in 2013 a very highly regarded book, If Mayors Ruled the World. I'm very sure that a lot of our participants today can relate to this thought. As former mayor in Copenhagen, for me, that was a very inspiring book, of course, as most of our panelists today will probably agree. But his thought was that nations talk, but cities act on climate change. Well, today we have gathered mayors from Europe who act on climate change and on the huge challenges that are facing us today. But fortunately, we are also joined by one of those national leaders who not just talk, but also stand out and is an example, a shining example for the rest of Europe on what to do, how to act, Climate Minister Ryan of Ireland. I'm very proud to be one of three hosts today and very happy to see so many of you joining this webinar. But first, let us watch an introductory video animation based on the European Cyclists Federation cycling measures triggered for COVID-19, and you'll find that on ECF's website. Let's start with this video first.
The European Green Deal wants to slash transport emissions by 90% by 2050. With more cycling, Europe can achieve that objective, and Europe wants more cycling. Cities and countries have invested over €1 billion in cycling improvements since the beginning of the COVID crisis. They have designed 2,300 kilometers of infrastructure to promote active mobility. 67% of these funds were committed by only 3 countries: France, Italy, and Finland. But the true heroes of this story are cities. In a matter of weeks, amid a sanitary, social, and economic crisis raging all over the world, visionary mayors have repurposed vast amounts of their public space. New bicycle lanes are popping up all across Europe at an unprecedented rate. Sidewalks are widened to allow for more people to walk safely. Speed limits get reduced on hundreds of kilometers of European streets, and motorized vehicles are banned from entire portions of our cities. These cities have already implemented over 1,100 kilometers of new measures to make walking and cycling better and safer. It is almost as if European mayors were just waiting for an excuse to push cycling as much as possible. Thanks to this outstanding mobilization of resources, Europe is becoming a cycle superpower. But we're not there yet. Europe wants more cycling, and it needs the Recovery and Resilience Funds to finance this revolution. The best moment to build a cycle lane was 40 years ago. The second best moment is now.
Thank you. And with this, I'm very happy to hand over the floor to Kevin Mayne, CEO of Cycling Industries Europe. Here you go, Kevin.
Thank you, Morten. And very good to be here with everybody at this roundtable this morning. European Cyclists Federation and Cycling Industries Europe combine the best of civil society voices for cycling and companies that believe in moving cycling forward right across our continent. And we do many things, events, programs, projects, but the core of what we do is to put cycling on the European agenda, to make sure more cycling is part of European policy. And we might have said that 2020 was a critical year. It was a critical year because this was the year the Green Deal came into force. This is the year of the Climate Pact. This is the year we start talking about a transition to a new economy that is fairer and greener and more sustainable. But of course, we didn't expect 2020 to be a year that we spent so much time on a pandemic. And that has forced us to look much more locally and as associations to support locally as well as nationally, internationally. And before we go into this kind of European program, we rarely get the chance to say thank you. But we can recognize the local community groups, the bike shops, the cargo bike delivery companies that actually supported communities and showed that cycling is an essential fabric of Europe. And even, when public transport and other modes have struggled, it was bike shares and other systems that have kept citizens on the streets of Europe. So even in the depths of the pandemic, I had to say thank you to so many people that delivered so much more cycling already. And of course, we found a common cause, as we've already seen, with mayors and public officials who've realized that cycling was important during the pandemic and are now with us with a kind of model to build back better, to say we can actually use this momentum to do something different. And it's always challenging politically when the majority is silent. We can tell you today the cycling majority is not silent. They are on your streets and have been all this year. And every survey that has been done says that more citizens want more cycling from this point forward. So yes, it's my pleasure to welcome this group of visionary leaders to this panel to talk about how more cycling is part of building a better Europe. And a special welcome to Frans Timmermans and a thank you to his team. Having worked with you this year, we know that you are part of this commitment, and your willingness to stand up and be with us today and on so many podiums talking about more cycling has been rewarding for us, the highest level endorsement we've had within the European Union probably ever. So today, audience, we hope this group will show how we can move forward this collaboration from the EU to cities to regions to national governments. And I hope this group of leaders will provide inspiration to other cities and countries that haven't yet worked out how to deliver more cycling. And when we finish, then it comes back to all of us, because this will be talk and this will be just ideas until it ends up in national resilience and recovery plans and brings us out of coronavirus with funds and with programs and policies that are available and bring cycling, more cycling, to every corner of Europe. And that's very exciting. So on behalf of CIE and ECF, I'm delighted to welcome our guests and our audience today. And I hope this webinar is a start of building a Europe with more cycling, a Europe that builds back better through cycling. So thank you. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you very much for these introductory words, and welcome from Cycling Industries Europe on behalf of both CIE and the European Cyclist Federation. It is a huge honor and great pleasure for me that we have today with us the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. Commissioner Timmermans is a key player, of course, in adopting the European Green Deal, the Resilience and Recovery Funds, and in transforming Europe into becoming a greener, more climate-friendly, even more human-scale continent. The Resilience and Recovery Fund can and will be crucial to this. The Commissioner is committed to more cycling, and this we will start by watching a video about.
You know that the Dutch word for bicycle is fiets. And it doesn't resemble any other language. And where did this word come from? It came from Fietsepferd, from the German, which is your sort of replacement horse. And that is what the bicycle has been for the Dutch people for over a century, the replacement horse. You see it everywhere. My passion for cycling started at a very young age when my grandfather made a bike for me, and he painted it bright blue with a white mudguard. I still see it in front of me. I was only 4 or 5 years old. I've been using the bicycle for all my life. It was the sport which captured my passion, and this will never, ever change. This year's Ronde van Vlaanderen, Tour of Flanders, was especially powerful. If you watched Van Aert and Van der Poel battle each other all the way until that exhilarating final sprint, it was simply amazing, and I still feel for Julien Alaphilippe, who fell before that finish. These fights are so beautiful, and they were captured by photographers. And one photograph I found was so beautiful under this ominous October sky that I really had to buy it. And when I contracted the photographer to get the print, I discovered that they had made so many more beautiful pictures, wonderful cycling photos. This one from when the Tour de France was in Brussels. And I bought it and I wanted to have it here in my office. Now, of course, for me, with my background from the Netherlands and then also living now in Belgium where cycling is met with so much passion, it is easy to be passionate and even romantic about cycling. But we have to be practical as well, especially now that, cycling will become part of our way of life. And many people want it to be part of a way of life. The nice thing about Dutch cycling is that we were always very rational about it. It was just a way to get around, not just a sport. It became a sport after that. And now it has to become the way around for everyone. I think that it's time to get there. Also because it's good for you. It's healthy. I remember times of my life when I had difficulties, when I was sad or things didn't go well. I took the bike. But also when I needed to go to the office and I didn't want to get stuck in traffic, I took the bike and I still take the bike. But for that, we need better infrastructure. We need more bike lanes. You see cities all over the world, and especially in Europe, concentrating on that. And in the Green Deal that we have launched, we need to make sure that we help cities create the right infrastructure. That this tremendously useful thing, which is called a bicycle, has even become more accessible to all generations, in all conditions, because of electric bikes that have now come into play and are really causing, I think, a revolution and opening it up to everyone. So, all in all, I believe the bicycle has a wonderful and romantic past, but also a glorious future ahead of it. And it will have a glorious future because it will be taken up by millions and millions more people, not just in the Netherlands, not just here in Belgium, not just in Denmark, not just in all these other places where traditionally it was already done, but in all of Europe, so that we will be able to say in the near future, bicycling is a European way.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the statement here in this video. There is no doubt that your commitment to more cycling, your passion for cycling is a key inspiration for all of us. Seeing these amazing pictures from not only European cities but also from the sports world is suddenly. Well, they were amazing pictures, and they are certainly inspiring to all of us. They show that we can really be a key part in Europe in this green transformation. And it also shows that the infrastructure, the safe, protected infrastructure, is necessary if we want to get people of all ages, all abilities, all incomes on their bicycle and make sure that they are part of green and active mobility. That can be done. That transformation is not just something for a few cities in countries we already know, like my own, but it's actually something for all cities all over the world, actually. We are now supposed to go to the panel, and we should go to the first keynote speak, which is Commissioner Timmermans, who will deliver that. But I think we have a slight moment before that. Kevin, do you have a word to say here before we start the keynote speak?
Thank you. Thank you, Morten. I'm hoping Commissioner Timmermans, Vice President Timmermans, is ready to speak, to follow with some live words after his video. But I think just confirming what we saw there, and I think we can all see that this is a commitment across citizen level, sport level, tourism level, livable cities level. And that, for us on the industrial side, creates a place where we can be part of the green industrial revolution for Europe as well. And that's a very special place to be. And I think it is also something we hear from the mayors, that they are creating an economic, livable, vibrant space. And there should be something, everything from the mountain bike, that takes us to the countryside, to the sports riders that go great pinnacles. And those are all within reach too because of the electric bike. So that is quite special. So I really appreciate that video, which is a permanent record from Vice President Timmermans. And hopefully, if the technical problems resolve, we'll have his live words, and maybe perhaps Jill can, we would like to kick off the panel until Vice President Timmermans reconnects.
Yes, and that also means that we move on to this this part of the panel, and I'm very happy to hand over the floor to my colleague on a daily basis in Brussels at the European Cyclist Federation office, Jill Warren, one of the the other co-CEO of ECF, who will be leading the panel today and who will introduce the panelists. Jill, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Morten. It is great to have such a distinguished group of mayors and ministers with us today, and we really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us. I'd like to introduce our roundtable participants in alphabetical order by city, or in this case as well, in one case by country. So from Athens, we have Mayor Kostas Bakoyannis. From Bratislava, we have Mayor Matouš Valo. From Ireland, we have Minister for Climate Action, Communication Networks and Transport, Eamon Ryan. From Ljubljana, we have Mayor Zoran Jankovic. From Marseille, we have Deputy Mayor Anne Meijak for the 6th and 8th District. And from Rotterdam, we have Deputy Mayor Judith Bokhoven. I'm very sorry to let you know that at quite last minute this morning, Mayor Fernando Medina from Lisbon wasn't able to join us, but great to have everyone else here. And Vice President Timmermans should be joining us very soon as well. He had back-to-back meetings this morning. So we've brought this roundtable together today to share thoughts on more cycling for a green recovery. This year, 2020, the COVID pandemic has been omnipresent in Europe. Europe's cities, regions, and countries have gone from lockdown to recovery, and unfortunately are now heading back towards lockdown in many places. The pandemic has impacted everything around us and has prompted people all across Europe to view many aspects of their daily lives through a different lens. And one of the aspects we're taking a fresh look at is mobility. So, for quite some weeks during lockdown, motorized mobility came to a near standstill. Quiet and empty streets ruled the day and gave us new perspectives, as well as attracted old and new cyclists. When lockdown eased, cities had to ensure that people could move about safely and respect social distancing, and that we didn't go from lockdown to traffic gridlock if more people turned to their cars to achieve social distancing. Not an easy challenge for our cities and countries to face. So I'd like to ask our panel first how the pandemic has influenced mobility in your cities or country, in the case of Ireland, and more specifically, how has it been influencing the demand for more cycling? So I'd like to go to Judith Bokhoven first from Rotterdam. Deputy Mayor Bokhoven, how has the pandemic affected mobility and the demand for cycling in Rotterdam?
Good morning, everybody. I'm very proud to be here, and but this is because this is a very important subject to me. In Rotterdam, our city, the demand for cycling and also walking has increased during the pandemic. The older people should stay at home as many as possible, and they did that. Also, car driving, the traffic was reduced. Afterwards, when we could start it again after the lockdown, we could start up. Also, the car traffic increased because people were very afraid to use the public transport, and it was a really pity. But very soon, people thought, well, what can we do in individual transport? And the use of bikes increased afterwards very quickly. It stabilized. It was it reduced first to 50% of the use before the lockdown, and afterwards, in a few months, we were it was at 100%. It still is now, and because people thought it was more healthy, more individual, and we had to make more space in our city. We have a lot of separated bikeways, so people are used to use the bike. But when it was increasing again, the using of the biking, we had to close some roads, and we have to change some roads also because there was too many space for cars and lack of space for biking. So we have to change the pattern of the streets, and although all Dutch people. They have 1 or 2 bikes already. They sold new bikes. There was a tremendous increase of the sale of e-bikes. It was very nice to see that, and people now are used also when the weather is getting worse. They still are using the bike. So that's one of the good things of COVID.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'd now like to move to Ljubljana, to Mayor Zoran Jankovic, to ask how the pandemic has been maybe a catalyst for more cycling in Ljubljana. Over to you.
Good morning to everybody. I'm really proud to be with my colleagues, especially with the Vice President Timmermans, because he was a cyclist in Ljubljana 2 years ago when he visited Ljubljana. But don't forget also not only the way of life, also the sports important, cycling. And don't forget in Tour de France, we had the first and the second, Pogacar and Roglic. This is not so easy to start this year during pandemic about way of life, cycling way of life. But we started 14 years ago when we decided to make our city more greener, and we are really proud because of this title, the highest title between cities, Green Capital of Europe. In this moment, we have more than 65% of all the green area, and the second important thing was mobility, which we started to use in 14 years ago when we decided to close the city center for traffic. We got 12 hectares of pedestrian area, which can use just the cyclists and the pedestrian or the walkers. And our decision at that time was that in next 20 years, 2025, that we'll have in Ljubljana 66% users of public transport, cyclists, and walkers. And just to have 33% users of cars. Now in this moment, in Ljubljana, users of cars is on the level of 40%, but this year help us to present more. I don't know, maybe it can be easier to be on the bicycle to meet each other. But it's really important now because it's so many things it's closed, and you know that also the same situation in Europe. In our opinion, the Commission must declare the rules for all countries, from north to south or from east to west, to have the same activities. And here for the cycling, Ljubljana is so good for cyclists because the distance is so short, and because we haven't so many public transport, more and more people use bicycle, and that's important. At this moment, we have more than 300 kilometers new bicycle paths, also in pedestrian area for walkers and cycling, and also in one direct streets where we have the limit of speed from 30 kilometers, also for use for bicycle. And now we also instead put a new 20 stations for city bike, and looking from this company, they tried and they told us that we are the first of daily users of city bike. Every day, every bike used 8 times. And I hope that we'll have how to enjoy this way of life with cyclists.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Herr Jankovic. I would now like to introduce Vice President Timmermans to everyone. He's been able to join us in the meantime. And I would like to go to him now if he'd like to say some opening words to us.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think you've taken a great initiative. I really like it. And I think that the issue of cycling is now really something very topical. Also, because of the pandemic, people have seen their cities with all the misery we've been faced with. They've also seen cities in a more clean state and more open. And there is a real demand for lessening our emissions. You know, if a third of our emissions are in cities, a lot can be achieved by decarbonizing public transport in combination with a more modular way of getting around in cities. And, you know, cycling is by definition the best way of solving that problem. So I would like to say that we would like to enter into strategic partnerships with cities across the European Union to exchange experience, to give support to this development, because it is part of creating greener and healthier cities. You know, bike lanes, investing in bike lanes is really a no regret investment, especially if you combine it with greening the cities to provide cleaner air and lower temperatures in cities that are very hot. And it also provides protection to the cyclists. I would argue that anybody in local government understands that this is so popular that if they invest in this, they can get more support from their population also in the next election. You know, it really would help if we could set targets. At the European level, we've set targets for 2030, minus 55% reduction of emissions as compared to 1990. We want to be climate neutral by 2050. Why don't cities sort of try and have the same sort of time schedule, probably even more ambitious time schedule, and then factor in how you could use the increase of cycling as an element to get there more quickly. So you decarbonize your public transport, and if the national plans allow for that, the Commission would really want to be part of that as well. You increase your cycling lanes, you increase the possibility to walk in cities, and you have a clear schedule when you want to get there. The final remark is this: you know, in the past, cycling was something, especially for younger people and in the flatter areas of Europe. But because of this great invention of the electric bike, you know, it's accessible to all ages and in all circumstances. So that should help introduce this idea of cycling as part of the, as a fundamental part of the solution of our mobility challenge, especially in urban areas. And I think the other revolution we've seen is that in most European countries, where cycling was seen as sort of a sport thing you did for recreation, the image of people in their suits or in their working clothes on a bike in a city has now become more common everywhere in Europe. I mean, in the Netherlands, we were used to that, like people in Denmark as well, but now it's becoming more common in Europe. And I mean, those of us who love cycling, those of us who are in business involved in cycling, would be absolutely out of their minds if they didn't use this opportunity to really have a cycling wave across the European Union. And wherever I can help, I'll be on your side, because I believe this is good, this is healthy, and this is also helpful to get us to being a climate neutral continent by 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President Timmermans, for those opening words. Very inspiring for all of us in favor of cycling here. Just to finish up this first round of questioning, briefly, I would like to ask Anne Meillac from Marseille how the pandemic has been a catalyst for more cycling in Marseille.
Hello, everyone. So yes, I'm from Marseille. I'm representing a brand new green mayor, Michel Rubirola. It has been quite a change for Marseille after 25 years of different piloting of the city. Marseille currently sees a surge in demand for cycling infrastructure, and we see that in the last counting of cycling people. It was the number of cyclists in Marseille was up 30% year on year in June 2020, and this growth has definitely continued to get bigger in September and October. As you probably know, today is the first day of a new confinement, a new lockdown in France. For 4 weeks, we are again at home for those who can. It is a little bit different to the first one, which was quite long. It was over 2 months. This time, schools and high schools will remain open, but still we will be forbidden to go for restaurants and any non-urgent shops, basically. So I also need to precise something that maybe not many people know outside France. Marseille is the second most populated city in France. It's very big. It was over 800,000 people here. But it's the largest in terms of surface. You could fit in both Paris and Lyon within Marseille if you were to paste it on top of Marseille, which is probably one of the reasons why we haven't had a lot of cyclists historically, because the city is so large, you can't go everywhere with a bike. For instance, I live in a district that is not so far away from the city center, but still it is 8 kilometers for me, within the city to travel half the city. So the two main catalysts for this surge in cycling in Marseille have been obviously e-bikes, but also, of course, the pandemic. However, in terms of cycling infrastructure, and we will get back to that later, Marseille is very much work in progress. And when I mean work in progress, I don't mean construction sites. I still mean thinking and studies.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very insightful. I'd now like to go to Bratislava to ask Mayor Matusz Valo briefly about how the demand for cycling has changed there.
Thank you very much. Bratislava, maybe you know it, was the first city in EU which closed its school and starting a national lockdown during the first pandemic. And we were very, the first wave of pandemic was very moderate. We are lucky to have it like that. And it also, maybe you don't know the fact that Bratislava lost during the last 30 years many possibilities to really start the cycling revolution, and we are very fine. We're very left behind all the other cities. So if the cycling revolution should start somewhere, is Bratislava, because we really need it. And the last 2 years I'm working on that. What is important, so we need to start really from beginning, and we're starting with the fact that we are trying to learn to teach our citizens that the car is not the only way to move around the city. We invest a lot of money and time and energy in the public transport, and we were lucky enough to see the numbers of people using public transport going up. Of course, in the first wave, we lost 90% of people using public transport. What is important for us is that during the 2 months during the lockdown, it showed the pandemic showed our city with less cars. And it was a big revelation for many people to understand that we can have less cars, and the city is completely different. The atmosphere in the city is completely different. This was a very important first step for us. And now I'm working very hard to, of course, use any of these facts to push for more cycling roads, and what is absolutely necessary for us are segregated cycling roads and spaces.
Thank you very much. Athens, Mayor Kostas Bakoyannis, are you seeing more cycling in Athens?
Well, let me thank you very much for the invitation and just take a step back for a moment, if I may. This is a historical opportunity. This is literally a once in a lifetime opportunity for all of us. I mean, if history teaches us one thing, is that public health crises are catalysts for urban revival. I mean, look at the New York Central Park or London's sewage system. So now we have this great opportunity, because it's a fine timing, to actually reset our cities and build them on the premise of sustainable mobility. For the 20th century, saw cities built on cars. Now it's about finding a new balance between the rights of all our residents. In Athens, we adopted the methodology of tactical urbanism. In a very short period of time, we moved forward with a major intervention in the center of the city, unifying our archaeological sites, reclaiming, actually, I would say, liberating public space, and changing the face of the city. Now, of course, this has created a very lively dialogue and a very lively discussion within the city. But that's something that we welcome, because we all know that, much like Bratislava, Athens unfortunately lags behind. Because of the economic crisis of the past decade, we have lost precious time. And now we are trying as quickly as we can to make up for it. Our biggest allies, and that's my final point, our strongest allies are the young. And I think that's very, very important, that you see young people, from the early or late teens to their mid-20s, who are extremely enthusiastic about what is been happening. So it's up to us now to create the necessary infrastructure, and that is where targets and funding, of course, are very useful to move forward in order to not just bounce back, but actually bounce forward after the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting points from Athens there. Finally, Minister Ryan, in Ireland, Ireland's announced major new funding for cycling and walking, which I'm sure we'll hear about later. But first, what influence has COVID had on mobility and cycling in Ireland?
Good morning, Jill. Similar to others, it's seen a huge increase in demand. I might just tell a couple of stories as examples, which I think give good hope. One area in the south side of Dublin, and I'm as well as being a national minister, I'm a Dublin resident, so I might speak about Dublin. And there was a project we've been looking for 10 years, which was to build a coastal, Dublin's on a bay, a coastal cycle track, and we were getting nowhere. As with so many pieces of infrastructure, we wanted to build cycling infrastructure. And one official, just one kind of bright, energetic official in May said, okay, maybe we use the pandemic to do it. There was a section in the Road Traffic Act saying you could do an experimental measure. You didn't have to go through all the planning and systems. And he had a good local mayor and good local councillors who were willing to support. And they took the coastal route in their part of the city. And in 3 months, they built this. It's an incredible facility. I don't know if you've ever been to Venice Beach in California, but he turned Dublin into Venice Beach. It was suddenly this coastal cycle route that was just spectacular. And it's full of people cycling, obviously now. It's been dramatic. And that was probably the most iconic message about, God, we can change our city. We can do things differently. Now, that was one brilliant win. We still have a lot of other work to do. The truth is, there's been a lot of increase in leisure cycling, but at the moment, because there's no real students going to university, there's no civil servants going to their offices, there's no tech workers coming into the city centre. So the actual amount of commuting cycling has not risen. I think our urgency is to take the road space we have as quickly as we can so that when the pandemic starts to ease and people start to return to work, to their offices, to colleges, that they get back on the bikes. So I have this sense of real urgency. We have to now grab the space quickly and try and make sure that when people start returning to normal life, it's a different normal. The second one I mentioned, I don't know if anyone's mentioned yet, but one of the real issues is we couldn't buy any bikes. I mean, and what are the reasons for that? Did we have too long a supply chain? France, do we need to build up the bike industry back in Europe as part of this change, so that we're not caught in a similar way in the future, where you cannot get a bike. We could not buy bicycles. The popularity went up so much. And I think in Europe, we need to look at this and we need to think, how do we strengthen our local manufacturing industries to supply local bikes? Being honest, is one of the changes. But COVID has been terrible, not good. But one of the few things is the change of sense of space. I was always inspired for years. I don't know if you remember, speaking of mayors, Enrique Peñalosa, the great mayor of Bogota, the greatest cycling champion of all times, because he speaks with poetry about how we can reclaim the streets, how the pavement is for kissing, and man and women are to walking as a fish is to swim. He used to speak in this language. I think out of the COVID crisis, it's that change. It's the sense of change of place and space and people connecting back to their local environment and it being special, it being beautiful, it being their local environment. And I think that's the chance. We should adopt Enrique Peñalosa's vision at this time.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to turn back to Vice President Timmermans to ask for his reaction to what he's heard here.
Well, it's very inspiring, and on an extremely personal note, Kostas, do me a favor and say hello to your mom. I've worked with her in the past, and she was a great colleague.
A pleasure, Commissioner. I'm sure you'll be happy to hear. Just don't put her on a bicycle yet, please. I don't think I can bear that.
Secondly, it's great to hear all this inspiration from cities across Europe. But it's also obvious that we're not all in the same starting position. But if the ambition is all directed in the same direction, the Commission is at your disposal to see how we can support your plans. Because, you know, to give you one example, in the renovation wave we've announced, we will also refurbish buildings, but also improve the electric charging facilities, and I would say not just for cars but also for bicycles in cities, and I believe that could be part of the plan to create more cycling mobility. The one issue, Eamon's point on bikes, yeah, we have a shortage, and the reason is very simple. Most bike components are made in China. And then assembled in Europe, but they can't be assembled in Europe if they can't get the components from China. And that's been a problem for the cycling industry across the European Union. And I think it's emblematic for one of the challenges we have as Europeans with our economy is to build up more resilience in Europe. And part of that is to look at our supply chains. I'm not saying we should become protectionist, but we should be able to build our own bikes, our own electric bikes, our own batteries, our own electric buses, to give you another example. So I think that this brings home this point as well. My final comment is this. As Eamon says, and I'm sure all the mayors will have this experience, people's mentalities have been deeply influenced by the COVID crisis, and they have taken a different look at how they get around, but also at the value of having a clean city, clean air, less cars in the streets, etc. So if we don't use this momentum to get us into a cleaner environment and to get people more on bikes, including Dora, everyone should be on a bike at some point, and it should be something that is seen as something accessible to all generations and all economic circumstances we're in. It shouldn't be a luxury thing. It should be part of our transport mix. And you know, I would encourage mayors to keep in dialogue with us to see where we could facilitate this. And perhaps we should be thinking about having some concrete targets. I was talking about targets earlier in terms of time frame, but we could also have concrete targets on how many kilometers of bike lanes will we want in the next 10 years. I think we could have a nice target, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000, but let's have a target.
Excellent. We like targets. Let's move on to our next question with our esteemed roundtable today. Something that's been gaining a lot of attention over the past months, some of it pandemic related, some of it not, is the notion of reimagining our cities into more sustainable and livable places. So cities built for people, cities which much better meet the needs of all, residents and visitors, not just cities that mainly cater for more and more and more cars. We see bold examples like the high-profile transformation of Paris, where lots of cycle lanes have been implemented and cycling increased 66% this summer compared to last year. I would like to ask you how you think a significant increase in cycling in your city can transform and benefit the city and its people. So how will the cycling make your city or your country greener and more livable? What would it bring? What's your vision there? And what challenges do you face in achieving that? So I'd like to pose this question first to the mayor of a city that's undergone a lot of transformation in its over 3,000-year history. So Mayor Kostas Bakoyannis of Athens, the floor is yours.
Well, it's not just about cycling. It's much more than that, because cycling actually carries a very heavy symbolism. It's a symbol of a different way of life. It's directly related to health, to well-being, to the environment. So I don't think that we should limit this conversation just to the benefits of actually getting on a bike and moving from your home to your office in the morning. It's much more than that. It actually represents a different and a new city. Now, Athens is extremely proud of its history, but we are also very, very proud of our present, and we want to be equally proud of our future. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of we're undergoing a major transformative project, which is now in its pilot phase, and which we believe will change the center of the city. However, having said that, this is just one first step. There are many more steps that we have to undertake. There's a long, long way to go. And of course, Athens being the birthplace of democracy, we take dialogue and we take engagement and pushback extremely seriously. So of course, as I also mentioned earlier, there is a very lively, spirited discussion, and at times the mayor is found at the center of this discussion. However, and this is my final point, I think those of us who are in decision making shouldn't fear dialogue. We shouldn't fear this discussion, because at the end of the day, it shows that there is a lot of enthusiasm and there's a lot of hope within the city, that the citizens themselves haven't given up, that despite the difficulties, they remain forward-looking. And that's, I think, is the good news that should energize us.
I'd like to go to Bratislava now, to Mayor Matuszwalo. How will cycling help make Bratislava more livable and green? And how will it transform your city?
Thank you very much. Of course, the cycling in Bratislava is quite popular, but we are talking about sport and relaxation. Everybody, we have a beautiful woods around Bratislava, just a few minutes from the center of the city. And what we need to work on as well, and where the cycling revolution, as I like to call it, really start, is to make people understand that they can use the bicycle for going to work. That's the main thing. And of course, we are counting on the fact that with more segregated bike lines, we will have less car, because people will use, as in many European cities already are people doing for many years, to just using a bike as a transportation way to the work and to all their daily jobs. So this is very important for us. But what I need to stretch out is also the fact that when I became mayor nearly 2 years ago, in Bratislava, there wasn't a plan for regulated parking. There wasn't real parking policies. And in reality, in Bratislava, 2 years ago and still today, you can park your car on sidewalk and it's legal and free, which we are fighting a lot, this fight, and trying to change it. It's something which is unique in a very bad way. And of course, today we have a new parking policies, a regulated parking, and we are working on implementing it. And when we are doing it, we are fighting with illegal parking, and in this way we are doing a space for more pedestrians and of course for the bikes. So for us to have a better parking biking infrastructure is the essential point, but is one part of the bigger picture, of course.
Okay, I'd like to ask one quick follow-up question just about Bratislava. I know you did mention the kind of sport and leisure aspect at the beginning of your reply. Bratislava is situated along the really popular Eurovelo 6 cycle route that follows the Danube. What's the economic impact of cycle tourism for Bratislava, and how do you see that developing further?
I mean, we have two very important lines. We have Eurovelo 13 and Eurovelo 6.
Yep.
And with more than 300,000 bikers per year. Of course, what is really interesting that we calculated that only 30% of these are tourists, and other parts are people from Slovakia. So we just trying to understand what is the real economic impact of our industry with this many of tourists coming to Bratislava on bikes. And of course, there is no good infrastructure in our accommodation centers or hotels for bikers, and still trying to understand how we know how we can benefit, but what are the real numbers today?
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'd like to go to Eamon Ryan now. So Ireland clearly wants more cycling, with the government's stated commitment to allocate 10% of the total transport capital budget for cycling projects and another 10% to walking. Tell us how this is going to benefit and transform Ireland. We'd love to hear that.
Well, I hope it'll start achieving what I mentioned earlier about grabbing space. It is about whatever the budget. It's the difficult political decision is sometimes around the road space, but the budget removes that as an obstacle. We have a budget now of about 360 million a year for active travel. We took that statistic from the OECD. They had a recommendation that 20% of transport budgets should be for active travel. We used it in a program for government negotiations, and it was agreed, and it's across all parties. It's popular, but the real test is actually, can you spend it? As I'm sure most of my colleagues will know, it's one thing having a budget, it's having the officials who can actually make it happen. It's switching, in my mind sometimes, it's switching those engineers away from the roads programs to the active travel programs. It's the planning and the consultation, and it's often it's not the budget. I mean, the budget's important, but that's only the first base. So I hope it will transform. And going back to what I was saying about how this moment to change, it's strange because the whole transport system is changing. This idea that everyone comes from the far distant suburbs into the centre and then in the evening goes back out again, even after COVID hopefully is resolved, I don't think we will go back to that. I think the distant working that has come will stay. I expect we will go to kind of, 2 or 3 days a week, people staying at home as normal practice. And in those circumstances, it gives us a chance to reimagine. And it reimagines the suburb as well as the centre. It reimagines life in the suburbs, because then people who are working from home in the suburbs will go to their local village centre during the day, which won't be empty. And in the centre, we need to reimagine it. It's not just offices. It has to be bringing people back in to live more in the centre. Now that will take time, but it's critically, I think, always putting transport and housing together, and transport-led development and housing is what's critical. So the budget is one thing, but if you can't get the housing and planning and other resources, the kind of administrative resources in place, then nothing will happen. So most of my time now is trying to get the system to be able to spend the money we have. I'm out there saying, here's the money, but you have to come and have the capability of spending it.
Thanks very much for pointing that out, because sometimes we think only about the money and that's the challenge, but actually there's a lot more challenges beyond that to realize these transformational projects. I'd like to go to Marseille, to Deputy Mayor Anne Meilhac. What will significantly more cycling do to transform Marseille and make it a greener, more livable city?
Well, actually, today, as I said, we see a surge in demand in usage of bikes, but Marseille is still very much a non-cyclable city. We hardly have any bike lanes today. We have like 60 kilometers maybe, but for a huge city. and most of them have been painted on sidewalks 15 years ago. So we can't really say this is an infrastructure at all. However, we have a key challenge there, allowing people to bike to work safely. Today, we have around 1% of people using the bike daily, whereas a national goal for France is 9%. And some cities like Paris is close to 5% already, but some other cities in France are more between 10 and 15%. So as we can see, we are very, very far behind. As just mentioned, we do have a need to have budgets, but we also have an issue specific to our local politics. Mobility budgets are piloted at the metropolitan level in Marseille, and whereas Marseille is half of the population of that metropole, it does include 92 cities and villages, and making sure that the budgets that have been planned for bikes or actually spent on bikes is a challenge. And historically, it has been systematically put on hold every time a road project came up, every time some more investment in public transportation was needed, which is also obviously very critical. We are underfunded also. I mean, the metropole is underfunded versus initial plans, and has been very lively debated in the last meeting of the metropole. So today we have a very small infrastructure network for bike lanes. So that's a key challenge we have at the moment. And as I said, we are reinitiating studies to make sure that we assess the impacts on car traffic of putting more bike lanes in place. With the lockdown starting again, we definitely have some more demand for emergency lanes. Also because the virus circulation is very, very high in France at the moment, and our public transportation is crowded. So people's demand for biking is growing every day. So we will maybe see again how European funds and European schemes can support our efforts as a city.
Thank you. So challenges I heard there included prioritization of projects and of course the general safety generally of people who want to cycle now.
Yeah, so separated lanes, we don't know that here yet.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Jankovic in Ljubljana, would just like to hear briefly from you. You did give us quite a vision, when you were speaking before about how you see cycling transforming Ljubljana. But what challenges do you face in realizing your vision there?
I last started with that because I'm the mayor for the last 14 years. And when we started to wrote the vision of Ljubljana 2025, always the main idea for all mayors, the quality of life of our cities. And during this 14 years, we changed 100 hectares brownfield area to the parks. We planted 40,000 trees, and now I turn back to the mobility because this is one of the most important part of this quality of life. When we closed 4 years ago the main street in Slovenska Street for cars, the black carbon decreased for 75%. And it's important for in this moment, in this year. 2 years ago, we got the money from European funds for sewage system. And the process of changes of putting sewage system is in the 261 streets from 1,626 streets. But our decision is in all these changes of this street, it's the main idea to get a new pedestrian area and a path for cycling. And our wish at this moment, we have users of cycling in our mobility about 16%, 1/6, started from 5% 14 years ago. And our wish to finish almost 25% of users of cycling, because Ljubljana is so good for cyclists. And don't forget, we found the oldest field in the world, 5,200 years. And I invite Mr. Timmermans to visit Ljubljana one more time also during this year, because that can be optimistic way to finish this pandemic. And I will take him to see all this field, and also prepare the tour with best cyclists in the world, Pogacar and Roglic. And this is also has so big influence for a new cyclist, especially the youngest, because in this moment all our country looking Vuelta before the Tour de France. But at the end we shall finish with this main idea to have users of cars in Ljubljana not more than 33%. All other will use cyclists, will use pedestrian area and public transport. And that's the main idea for them. And I hope that everybody of the mayors will try to get this, the highest award between cities, the Green Capital of Europe, because this is the future, not only for Europe, but for all the world. And we are proud about that, but the main idea to try to listen our citizens. In this year, which is hard, difficult year, for the cyclists, we got just two questions. When we make more paths for cycling, and the second, when we make a new bike station for our city bike. And in 2020, 21, we shall put 25 new bike stations, and that means 250 bicycles.
Super.
Welcome to Ljubljana, to all of you.
Can't wait to go there. We were supposed to go to Ljubljana this year for the Velo City conference, which unfortunately had to be postponed, but it's now going to take place in 2022. So
we waited you for with open heart, but yes. Also we shall wait you when pandemic will finish.
Absolutely, thank you. Last but not least of our round of mayors and ministers, I'd like to go to Deputy Mayor Judith Bokhoven from Rotterdam. Compared to other cities in this roundtable today, Rotterdam is far ahead in terms of a modal share for cycling. Although compared to other cities in the Netherlands, it might be seen as more of a car city or be seen as having a way to go on that front. So maybe what can other cities learn from Rotterdam, where cycling levels are already high in European terms, but also what will more cycling bring to Rotterdam for the future?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Also, when Rotterdam, after the Second World War, we were bombed, and we had to rebuild the city. And at that time, people thought redesigning our city as a car city would bring us prosperity. And nowadays, well, I think we made some kind of wrong decisions in that time, and now we have to redesign our city for a more healthy city, because that will bring us more prosperity, and it will make the city more resilient and future-proof. So the people of Rotterdam, they thought really the car was a symbol for prosperity, and they find it very difficult to transform to a city bike. But there's some good news also. I heard your compared to the other cities in the Netherlands, we were our cycling average we were below that, but now we are also reaching the Dutch average from 30% of all trips that are made by bike. So we are rather happy, but we are not finished already. We have a lot of space in Rotterdam, so we have also the opportunity to change the roads and to make it more comfortable to bike. Because, and you said it before, all of you, active mobility is the answer to many challenges we have as a city. But you have also to work at not only at infrastructure, and we do that a lot, and we invest a lot in the infrastructure, but you have also have to work at the image of biking, because if people think it's you only have to bike if you can't afford a car, it would be very pity, because we think it is an answer to a lot of challenges. And I think it is very important as government that we give the good example. Frans Timmermans, in the introduction movie, he said, fiets is the Dutch word for bike. And I think as a government, we have to practice what we fiets. Practice what you bike. We really have to show that is a nice lifestyle, and that is a symbol of prosperity and to be future-proof. The other thing that is very important, because we already reached the 30% of bikers in the city for every trip. Safety is very important. In the Netherlands, you can see biking is not only a sport or for some young and healthy people. Everybody bikes, the old people, young people, pregnant people. We are very proud of it. But with the increasing of the amount of the bikers, there are also more accidents because it is very crowded, and we don't even have to invest in the bike lanes, but also intersections, because it is so crowded. So we still have to invest, and also the chain of biking is as strong as its weakest chain link. And it is very important to invest in all the kinds of structure, not only the bike paths, but also the safe bicycle parking spaces. Because otherwise we should introduce a new problem. Then we are, because biking is so efficient if you look to the public space, but you have to park the bikes everywhere. And well, you know, maybe you know some pictures from Amsterdam. It looks very romantic, but it is very difficult if you walk on the to walk, because there is no space in the narrow streets. So you have to invest in that, and that is, I think it is a problem for cities, because we do the investments, but especially the investments on infrastructure, they are very expensive. If you want to fix a barrier, like a barrier by highway or waterway, that is so expensive. But it's very important for people to drive quickly through the cities. We really need some help in that, because all the benefits, because people are more using more active mobility, they are going to the assurance companies, for example. It is not only the investments, they don't pay back at once. That's sometimes difficult. So we really can help.
Challenge.
Yeah. Yes. So we really can use some help with that.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith Buchhoven. I would like to turn back to Vice President Frans Timmermans to ask for his reaction to this. We heard a lot of challenges here, whether it's funding, prioritization, safety, making sure that funds that have been allocated do get spent, and that there's the expertise there and things. How would you react to that? How can cities, countries draw on more support from institutions like the European Commission in helping to solve this, to get more cycling and more livable cities?
I think it would be already very useful if cities would team up and look at the challenges and the things they have in common and the things that are different. And then the things they have in common in terms of challenges are the things we would like to address as a priority from the European Commission, because then we could sort of offer some solutions that could be applicable in most cities across the European Union. So we will certainly do an effort in trying to get all the information we need, where the bottlenecks are and what the challenges are. But if you could team up, you all have sister cities across the European Union. If you could just team up and say, okay, we all want to introduce cycling more in our city,
We all have comparable challenges. We all also have challenges that can't be compared. But as long as you can make an inventory of comparable challenges, perhaps we can then find one-size-fits-all solutions at the European level that would also bring down costs and afford us an easier access to European programs, for instance, in supporting infrastructure, in supporting new forms of mobility. The one issue that is a bit carefully avoided, which I think we need to address as well, is how you disincentive cars in cities. It's not just about introducing bicycles, it's also about introducing a model of transport with your public transport that would make it easier for people to leave their cars somewhere else, outside of the city or at home. And I think system integration is something that I would like now to also to put on the table. How do you integrate the cycling system, for instance, the availability of bikes you can hire with your trams, your buses, and your trains, so that if I look at my oldest kids' generation, they're in their early 30s. They don't think in terms of owning a car anymore. They own a car if they have no alternative. But if they want their transport needs to be addressed. They want to get from one place to the other, and the easier we can make it with public transport, the less they feel the need to have their own car or to use their own car. So I think the one thing we need to, if you want to promote cycling, you have to have a modular attitude towards public transport, or towards not even just public transport, towards the transport needs, the mobility needs of our citizens. And I think this is the integrated way we at the Commission would like to work on this, and any input you can give us from the cities with your best experiences or your worst experiences could help us tailor our policy to lead in the right direction.
Just the speed round. Okay, thank you very much for that. I have one last question. This is a speed round. So all we have time for is a very quick answer from each of our participants. So imagine that your city receives a multi-million euro grant, that has to be spent quickly to achieve impact for cycling. There's a lot of things you might invest in. It might be separated and protected bike lanes, or safe bicycle parking, or purchase and repair subsidies, or a bike sharing scheme, or something else. You can only name one thing. What is the first thing, or the highest priority thing you would invest in if the funding is there? Let's go in alphabetical order by city here. Athens, Mayor Kostas Bakayanis, what would you spend the money on for cycling?
Very quick answer, 3 words: networks, networks, networks. Meaning networks of safe, dedicated bicycle lanes.
Excellent, thank you. Bratislava, Mayor Matusz Valo, what would you spend it on?
Just one word: networks.
Okay.
But seriously, is of course networks and 100 kilometers of already existing bike lines, which are in very bad shape, some reconstruction of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much. Let's go to Ireland, Minister Eamon Ryan. If you had a multi-million euro grant to spend very quickly, what would you spend it on?
Safe routes to schools, and I'd allow the adults use them the rest of the day as well.
Excellent. Okay, children first. Ljubljana, Mayor Zoran Jankovic, what would you spend a multi-million euro grant on for cycling?
Separated, protected bike lines with safe parking for bicycles.
Okay, that's 2 things, but we'll forgive that.
Just one, and
Okay.
separate bike lines, finish with safe parking.
Okay, it's all that thing. Excellent. Marseille, Deputy Mayor Anne Meillac, what would you spend the money on?
Well, definitely safe, separated bike lanes, and I would add not on sidewalks, but on the streets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks very much. And Rotterdam, Deputy Mayor Judith Bokhoven, what would you spend a multi-million euro grant on for cycling?
Yeah, because our network is getting stronger and stronger. Our weakest link is safe bike parking. And we need a lot of that. Yeah, the lack just now from 30,000 parking places in the city center.
Okay, thank you so much to all of our roundtable participants. It's really been insightful discussions. I would like to ask Vice President Timmermans if you have any final words before we do our closing today.
Well, having listened to what the top priorities are of the mayors of the cities, I would encourage them to address your needs to the central government, because the recovery plans that they have to submit to the European Commission for us to be able to spend the 1.8 billion we will have in facilities for the recovery. If those plans would include these infrastructure questions, that would be wonderful, because now we see, we have the impression that many countries will be asking for more roads, etc., because that's what they've been doing forever. But if you could sort of shift some of that towards physical infrastructure for cycling in cities, that would be extremely helpful. And it's relatively a no-brainer, because it's expensive, but it's also straightforward, and it's no regret, because the results of this are always positive in any configuration. Thank you.
Just one sentence to Vice President. Just one sentence. Don't forget the idea to give the money direct to the city from European funds, especially for this kind of way of life.
Well, that is truly an excellent question. And again, the more cities work together across national borders, the easier it becomes for the Commission to work directly with cities. Any cross-border initiative you take immediately gets a European dimension, if you understand what I'm saying. And then if you work together with other cities in Europe, and we can work with you, it becomes also more difficult for national governments to create obstacles in this cooperation. And sadly, in some of our member states, not the ones on this call, but sadly in some of our member states, working with local government has been made a bit more difficult because of political differences between the mayors and central governments. And that would be a pity if that were to happen. So my call on you is also show solidarity with your sister cities across the European Union, so we can create real European projects between cities that we can support from the European Commission.
Thank you very much for that. And this concludes the roundtable part of today. For closing remarks, I'd like to turn over first to my co-CEO, Morten Kabel.
Thank you very much, Jill, and thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mayors. This has been an excellent panel of great leadership, of huge inspiration for all of us, for the rest of Europe, hopefully also. And more cycling is definitely the way to go forward. And I think you have shown us this today with your remarks. I think the Commission is now really also showing us that cities must take up the challenge and be ready to build, to be ready to take part in the Resilience and Recovery Fund and the whole New Green Deal of Europe. To end today's session, I'm very happy to have our two presidents of the organizing the event today, Christophe Najdovski, the Deputy Mayor of Paris and President of the European Cyclists Federation, and Tony Grimaldi, CEO of Cycle Europe and President of Cycling Industries Europe. I think we're first to go to Christophe. So Christophe, please take the floor.
Thank you, Morten. So on behalf of ECF and CIE, I want to thank European Vice President Frans Timmermans, our panel of mayors and Minister Ryan for your contribution to this event. It is clear from your words that we heard today that you are already providing the political leadership needed to grow cycling in the EU. So we thank you, and we also congratulate you for this vision. Now, the question is that the leadership must guide us to action. Coming up, we have the allocation of 670 billion euros to national governments through the EU's Resilience and Recovery Fund. And this will be followed by the EU Green Deal, climate plans, and transport and environmental strategies that at all levels from the EU to cities. We know also that, and we have the conviction that more cycling must be at the heart of these plans. Already 1 billion euros of fast-track cycling measures and the uplift in cycle use, cycling sales, and cycling jobs during this pandemic have showed just how fast cycling can change Europe. But this is only the start. We as ECF and CIE and the other International Cycling Association, we have created an action plan that is ready for any city, region or government to implement. You can download it today from either of our websites, but Tony and I will briefly explain you the two most important packages that the EU should look for in every government action plan. And I heard also what our Vice President Timmermans said about a cross-border initiative. We already have a network at ECF called Cities and Region for Cyclists, which can be also this kind of network that can help also to implement this plan and also to have these funds for our cities. I heard also what all you said in your conclusions about networks. So we have the conviction that first must be infrastructure, safe and accessible places for all citizens of all ages to cycle in safety for the whole length of the journey. I would like also to give a message to my colleagues because I am also elected as deputy mayor in Paris. In Paris, where we implemented with our mayor, Anne Hidalgo, a network of 50 kilometers of pop-up bike lanes these last months, we had an increase by 70% of the use of bikes since last spring. And now we have about 400,000 trips that are made daily by bike. And we are more or less maybe at 10 to 50% of the daily trips are now made by bike. And the proverb says that also in urban planning that if you build roads, you will have cars. If you build cycle lanes, you will have cyclists. So if we want to move to carbon neutrality, we need also to reshape our cities and give the necessary space to people who would like to cycle. I like also to quote Brent Toderian, who is a Canadian urban planner. He says that it is hard to justify a bridge by the number of people swimming across a river. So that is also a help for you to justify also that the fact that you can invest in new bike lanes, even if the people aren't already there. But in a few weeks or a few months, the people and the cyclists are there. I would like to conclude to say that the reallocation of road space during COVID has been fast. It has been low cost and effective, but we know cities need money to make these measures permanent. New junctions and complementary measures like parking at destinations are also needed. Across the whole EU, we predict that a minimum of 10 billion euros is needed to enable more EU cities to catch up with the measures that were implemented in March in several cities across Europe and also in different regions. So we can make it together, and I'm sure that we will achieve this goal also together. Thank you, and I give the floor to Tony Grimaldi.
Thank you, Christoph, and you are right on both counts. I want to add my thanks to the panelists for sharing their vision. It is an incentive for all of us to act. And you are also right that every national plan must have a relocation of space to cycling as a core measure. But we also agree that infrastructure alone is not enough. For many people in the EU, it's not affordable or practical to have a bike today, especially the e-bike or the cargo bike. The goals and policies of the EU talk about a Europe where no one is left behind. But unfortunately, it is the poorer people in the EU who have been affected by COVID, who suffer worse health outcomes and whose transport needs are most complex. So access to bikes must be the second pillar of every national resilience and recovery plan. We believe that every city with more than 50,000 inhabitants must have an affordable bike share and e-bike sharing scheme. And all cities must ensure that bike share reaches the neighborhoods, just as we see in Paris. And we must extend the e-bike access funds that have been started in a few countries across the whole EU, because we know that will get the people out of cars onto the bike. Across the whole EU, we believe 5 billion euro must be committed to cycling access on top of the 5 billion euro investment in infrastructure. It is the fastest, fairest, and the most cost-effective program in the EU Resilience and Recovery Facility. Changing cities, protecting the environment, growing our economies. We, Cycling Industries Europe, together with ECF, we are here to help. We have prepared proposals. We have guidance for the plans to make sure that your government knows exactly how to add cycling to the National Resilience and Recovery Plan. And ladies and gentlemen, dear EU official, ministers, and bicycle friend, it has been a fascinating and inspirational roundtable discussion and webinar today with several hundred participants. And I'm very proud with the partnerships we in CIE have with ECF, and I am impressed of the staff of ECF and the excellent staff of CIE with the fantastic staff of Frans Timmermans in preparation of this important webinar. I also would like to thank the panelists, and I'm proud to see today that we have mayors with engagement and action for a sustainable future. I'm proud to see a new leadership in Europe, and I would like to thank you, Frans Timmermans, for the courage to take the leadership for the Green Deal to the next level. Taking cycling seriously, realizing that cycling is part of the solution. We as Cycling Industries Europe and ECF, we are here to help. We have prepared plans, but these plans should not be in the paper. The world is watching us. We can take action now. We can go fast as companies, authorities, cities, and countries. We have proven it during COVID that we can act and increase cycling. Now, it is up to the national governments to take actions. Funds are available. The world is watching Europe. We can take the leadership for a new sustainable future. We can achieve sustainable green cities, livable cities, sustainable economy and quality of life. I am proud of being European today. Thank you all for your engagement. And as Frans Timmermans said in the beginning of the film, we have a glorious future. Thank you all for the participation. I'm very proud being European. Thank you.
The European Green Deal wants to slash transport emissions by 90% by 2050. With more cycling, Europe can achieve that objective. And Europe wants more cycling. Cities and countries have invested over €1 billion in cycling improvements since the beginning of the COVID crisis. They have designed 2,300 kilometers of infrastructure to promote active mobility. 67% of these funds were committed by only 3 countries: France, Italy, and Finland. But the true heroes of this story are cities. In a matter of weeks, amid a sanitary, social, and economic crisis raging all over the world, visionary mayors have repurposed vast amounts of their public space. New bicycle lanes are popping up all across Europe at an unprecedented rate. Sidewalks are widened to allow for more people to walk safely. speed limits get reduced on hundreds of kilometers of European streets, and motorized vehicles are banned from entire portions of our cities. These cities have already implemented over 1,100 kilometers of new measures to make walking and cycling better and safer. It is almost as if European mayors were just waiting for an excuse to push cycling as much as possible. Thanks to this outstanding mobilization of resources, Europe is becoming a cycle superpower. But we're not there yet. Europe wants more cycling, and it needs the recovery and resilience funds to finance this revolution. The best moment to build a cycle lane was 40 years ago. The second best moment is now.
Thank you very much, everyone, as you're leaving. Fantastic event, great response and good support from the whole team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great team. Well done, ECF.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks everyone so much.
Thank you. Bye.